She always turned off her GPS. Every time she went to yoga, Elizabeth made sure her location was invisible, like she was slipping out of reality itself. And I never questioned it, why would I? I trusted her. Until the night she forgot. I was in the kitchen, stirring tomato sauce in slow circles, my sleeves rolled up, a bottle of red breathing on the counter beside me. The kids were in their rooms. The house was quiet, the kind of soft quiet that makes a man feel like everything is in its place. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at it without thinking, expecting a work update or maybe a recipe notification. But what lit up the screen wasn't a message. It was a location. Elizabeth's location. At first, my eyes passed over it the way you skim a word you've read 1,000 times. But something, some primal, invisible thread in my chest, pulled taut. She wasn't at the yoga studio. She was 30 minutes outside the city, in a wooded stretch of countryside. No shops, no cafes, no meditation domes or Zen gardens. Just a villa. And the moment I saw it, the moment my gaze really settled into those glowing coordinates, I felt it. That sense. That terrible, low, sinking sense. She had lied to me. My name is Sean. I'm 37. An architect. A husband. A father. And on that night, I became something else entirely. A man who knows. The love, the rhythm, the trust. I met Elizabeth on a rooftop in downtown Chicago. She wore a long navy coat, the belt cinched tight at the waist, and a scarf she kept fussing with like it wouldn't sit right. Her laugh, though, it was the kind that slipped through the cracks in your armor before you even realized you were vulnerable. We'd both reached for the last cup of cider at a holiday party. She looked at me, one brow raised, and said, "If you're charming, I'll let you have it." I said, "Then you're going to be very disappointed." She laughed. I let her take the cider. That was 12 years ago. We were married a year later, barefoot on the Oregon coast, the waves pulling at our ankles, salt drying on our lips. I remember her veil catching in the wind and the way she looked up at me, half smiling like she knew something I didn't. That's what being married to Elizabeth always felt like. Like she had a secret. But it wasn't a dangerous thing. Not then. She was the kind of woman who made ordinary things feel alive: Sunday pancakes, late-night drives, grocery store trips. Everything felt like it had a rhythm when she was around. She moved through the world like music. Not hurried. Not loud. But purposeful. I was a calm man, steady. I designed homes for a living, places meant to last. And I built our life that way too, brick by brick, habit by habit. We settled into the little rituals married people collect, brushing teeth side by side, trading sips of wine, folding laundry while some Netflix show droned on in the background. There was comfort in that routine. Love in it. And then, about a year ago, she found yoga. At first it was casual. A Saturday morning here, a Wednesday evening there. She'd come back flushed, loose, radiant in a way that startled me. I told her she looked happy. She said she felt clearer. Like she was finding herself again. I didn't think much of it. We'd just turned the corner on our 11th anniversary, and I knew things had gotten quieter between us, less touch, more autopilot. I figured maybe this was her way of reconnecting. I supported it. Bought her a new mat. Even drove her to class once when the car wouldn't start. Then it became a pattern. Yoga every night, sometimes twice a day. She joined a private studio out in the hills. Said the energy was better there. That word, energy, started showing up a lot. She said things like, "I need to realign," or, "My body holds memory I need to release." I didn't argue. I was a man of logic, not instinct. I didn't speak that language. She began wearing more whites and creams, loose clothes that caught the wind. Her eyes took on a softness I couldn't name. And her scent changed too, less perfume, more sandalwood, like she was trying to become smoke. Some nights she'd stay late after class, sipping tea with the girls, as she called them. Other nights she'd meditate in the car, needing stillness before coming back to the noise. I'd wait up for her, sometimes with food, sometimes just with a warm bed. She always came home. Eventually. And every time, I kissed her. Asked how class was. She'd smile. Say it was good. And then float away. I didn't question it. I didn't want to be that man, the paranoid husband, the jealous one. Elizabeth had always needed her space. She was independent, wild in a gentle kind of way. That was part of her magic. You didn't cage someone like that. You let them fly and trusted they'd come back. And for 11 years, she did. Until the night she didn't turn off her GPS. Until I saw the pin, blinking quietly among the trees, far from any yoga studio. A villa in the woods. Secluded. Intimate. I told myself it could be anything, a retreat, a group session, an emergency. But my hands had already begun to shake. The pasta on the stove had started to burn. The room felt too small. I called a taxi. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't text her. I just went. And as the city slipped behind me and the hills closed in, I realized something I'd never allowed myself to consider. There are moments that don't just change your life. They end the life you thought you had. It wasn't a straight line, the way suspicion crept in. It was more like fog, soft at first, barely there. Then thick. Blinding. The first time I noticed it, she came home barefoot. It was late. Almost 10. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with my laptop still warm on my thighs. I woke to the sound of the front door unlocking, the quiet click of her keys, and then the whisper of skin against hardwood. I blinked, confused. She stood there in the dim hallway, hair damp, cheeks flushed. No shoes. I asked, half asleep, "What happened to your sandals?" She smiled, a little too quickly. "I forgot them at the studio. Took them off after Savasana and walked out barefoot." It felt kind of grounding. That word again. Grounding. I nodded, pretending that made sense. But something in me itched. 2 weeks later, I found a strand of long black hair in her scarf. Elizabeth's hair is chestnut. Lighter. Softer. This strand was different, darker, coarser. I stared at it for a long time, turning it between my fingers like it might unravel an explanation. I didn't ask her about it. I didn't want to hear the lie. Instead, I watched. I listened. Not like a spy. Like a husband who wasn't ready to lose the world he built. She started humming around the house. Low, quiet melodies I didn't recognize. Foreign, almost tribal. When I asked what it was, she said, "Mantra work. It helps release tension from the spine." Then she floated away, leaving the scent of incense and rosewater in her wake. At night, she wore silk robes I'd never seen before. Burnt ochre, forest green, earth tones, sensual and loose. She said they helped her breathe easier. But something about the way she moved in them made me feel like an intruder in my own bedroom. I started noticing patterns. She left every Thursday and Sunday without fail. Sometimes more. She always came home around 9:30. And always had a reason if she didn't answer her phone. Phone was on silent. We stayed late for a breathwork session. I left it in the locker. One night, I called at 8:15. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. At 8:40, I tried again. Straight to voicemail. At 9:12, she walked in the door, radiant and damp from hot yoga. When I asked why she didn't answer, she said, "You know I don't check my phone during class." Her tone was gentle. But final. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. I buried myself in work. Designed a home for a family in Tahoe, 3 stories, glass walls, a courtyard meant for stargazing. I imagined Elizabeth and me in it, pretending the walls weren't cracking around us. Pretending the silence between us was peace, not avoidance. But the silence, it grew louder. She no longer asked about my day. No longer touched my hand in passing. Our dinners became ritualistic, shared space, shared time, but separate worlds. I'd talk about the firm, the kids, the new intern who printed blueprints upside down. She'd smile, nod, say, "That's nice," then retreat to the bath for an hour. One night, I followed her in. She was in the tub, eyes closed, steam rising in thick curls. A candle flickered on the counter. Her arms floated on the water like driftwood. I sat on the edge of the tub and said, "You seem far away lately." She opened her eyes slowly. "I'm just changing. Growing." "Am I growing with you?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Just stared at the flame. "Maybe. I don't know." That answer shattered me more than any fight could have. Because it was honest. I began waking up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, my breath shallow. I'd reach across the bed just to touch her shoulder, needing proof she was still real. Still mine. Sometimes she'd flinch. Other times she'd already be gone, claiming she couldn't sleep and had gone to meditate downstairs. But I knew. I knew before I let myself admit it. There was someone else. Someone who made her laugh the way I used to. Someone who gave her something I no longer could. Or wouldn't. Or didn't know how to. I just didn't know who. Not yet. But then came that night, the night her GPS didn't shut off. The moment that changed everything. The blinking dot on the map. The countryside villa. The slow, terrible certainty rising in my chest like smoke from a fire I hadn't noticed until it was already too late. I put down my wine glass. Shut off the stove. And for the first time in my life, I followed her. The taxi wound through the outskirts of town, climbing slowly into the hills where the city lights no longer reached. Pines lined the road like sentinels, tall and dark, swaying gently in the night breeze. I sat in the back seat, hands folded, heart galloping beneath my ribs. I didn't speak. Neither did the driver. The GPS on my phone blinked steady. The pin hovered there like a quiet truth, Elizabeth's location. Not the yoga studio. Not a cafe. Not even another friend's home. A villa. Tucked off a private road. Modern. Remote. Intimate. I tried to think of alternate reasons. Told myself maybe someone had fallen ill. Maybe it was a retreat, one of those spiritual intensives she sometimes mentioned in passing. But no matter how I tried to dress it up, the silence in me knew better. You don't wear lipstick and silk robes to a crisis. You don't laugh, God, the sound of it, as if the world isn't burning. The driver slowed as we reached the address. The house rose from the hillside like it had grown from the earth, glass and cedar and soft gold lighting spilling out into the trees. The driveway was gravel. Crunching under the tires like bones. And there it was. Elizabeth's car. Parked neatly in front of the villa, her yoga mat still visible in the back seat. I told the driver I'd walk from there. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded and pulled away, his taillights vanishing like the last tether to my old life. I stood in the shadows beneath the trees, breath clouding in the cool air. Music played softly from inside, jazz, I think. Something easy, intimate. I crept closer, the crunch of my shoes masked by the wind. Then I saw her. Through the wide glass window. She was barefoot, dancing in slow circles around the living room. A wine glass in her hand. Her hair was loose, tumbling over one shoulder, and her smile, God help me, it wasn't the one she gave me. It was younger. Unburdened. Almost, free. And he was there. The yoga instructor. Younger. Built like something carved out of stone and sunlight. Shirtless. Laughing. His hand rested lightly on her hip as she passed. She twirled and leaned into him, pressing her forehead against his chest. My Elizabeth. Smiling. Unwound. Undone. In his arms. They kissed. Not with hunger. Not in haste. But with a slow, deliberate kind of knowing. Like they'd done it 100 times. Like they didn't need to rush because the lie had already held long enough. My heart didn't break all at once. It cracked quietly, like ice beneath your feet. I didn't scream. Didn't pound on the glass. I didn't give them the satisfaction of drama. Instead, I took out my phone. Steady hands. Cold fingers. One photo. Just one. Elizabeth, mid-laugh, wine in hand, his arms still draped across her bare back. I turned. Walked back down the hill. I didn't cry. Not then. When I got home, I sat at my desk. The house was still. Familiar. But something had shifted, like the furniture itself sensed the fracture. I printed the photo. Folded it in half. Wrote 7 words beneath it in clean, architect's script. Yoga heals, but sometimes it reveals the real poses. I placed it on her desk, right where she'd see it in the morning. Then I poured myself a glass of the same wine we'd opened on our 10th anniversary. And I waited for the sun. She came home just after dawn. Hair damp. Face scrubbed clean. Still playing the role. I lost track of time, she said, dropping her keys in the bowl. I said nothing. Then she stepped into the office. I heard the pause in her breath. The stillness. The paper sliding from the desk. I waited. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She smiled. I knew you'd find out eventually, she said, her voice calm. I'm tired of pretending too. I studied her face. No guilt. Just release. As if the truth had set her free. I wanted more, she added. Freedom. Energy. Myself. And just like that, she walked upstairs. I sat there in the morning light, stunned by the quietness of the ending. No shouting. No apology. Just the sound of something finished. The silence after betrayal isn't empty. It's loud. Deafening, really. It fills every room, echoes in every clink of a glass, every distant dog bark, every drawer opened and shut with a little too much care. That morning, after Elizabeth went upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen as the coffee pot hissed and sputtered. The same sound I'd heard 100 mornings before, but that morning, it felt like a laugh in my face. She came down an hour later, dressed in linen, barefaced, barefoot. She moved through the room like she always had, as though the truth she'd left on the desk wasn't sitting between us like a loaded gun. I didn't speak. I couldn't. She poured herself tea. When I finally looked up, she was standing across the counter, watching me. Not smug. Not apologetic. Just still. You're calm, she said, almost like a question. I've been building houses my whole life, I said. Sometimes they collapse. You learn not to scream when the walls give out. That made her blink. She sat across from me, legs crossed, hands wrapped around her mug like it was some kind of anchor. You were always good at making things seem unshakable, she said. And you were always good at making them look beautiful. A pause. A long one. Then she said, he wasn't a mistake. I didn't ask. But I need you to know. I didn't just fall into it. Of course not. Elizabeth never stumbled. She chose. I let out a long breath. My voice was low, steady. How long? She didn't flinch. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of secrets buried inside post-yoga tea sessions, beneath the scent of sage and sandalwood. A second life threaded between the hours of our real one. And the kids? I asked. Her face softened. I never brought him here. Never involved them. You don't have to bring a fire inside the house to burn it down. That one landed. I could see it in the way her eyes dropped, just for a second. Then she said, he wants me to move in. He owns the villa. It's different with him. Different, I repeated, like tasting something bitter. He sees me. The word struck harder than I expected. Because I used to. I used to see her. Before she became some outline of herself, before yoga, before freedom, before she traded our life for balance. But maybe that's a lie I told myself, too. She stood. Walked over to the window. I wasn't unhappy, Sean. I just wasn't, alive. I almost laughed. You didn't have to kill what we had to feel alive. Her shoulders rose, then fell. There was a long stretch of silence then. The kind that hurts to sit in. Finally, she turned. I'll come by for my things next week. And then she was gone. No fight. No apology. Just a soft close of the door and the distant crunch of tires down the driveway. I sat in that silence for a long time. Later that day, I went upstairs and pulled out a suitcase. Not hers. Mine. I folded the clothes I needed, left the rest behind. I left my keys on the counter. Called the office and told them I'd be stepping back. And then I left. Not because I was running. But because the house had become a grave. And I wasn't going to live in a tomb. That night, I checked into a small rental by the coast. Nothing fancy. Just a clean bed, salt air, and the steady rhythm of the ocean beating like a second heart. And as I lay there, the first real sleep in months closing in, I realized something. Elizabeth had been right. Sometimes the life you build becomes a cage. And sometimes betrayal isn't what breaks you, it's what wakes you up. I didn't speak to Elizabeth for 3 weeks. Not out of anger. I just didn't know what to say anymore. Every word between us had felt so carefully measured for so long, like walking a line with no rails. Once you stop performing for someone, once the stage collapses, silence feels like mercy. The rental by the coast was small. 2 rooms, white walls, chipped furniture. But there was something pure about it. Honest. No history embedded in the walls. No photos. No wedding china in the cabinets. Just salt and wood and wind. And me. Every morning, I'd make coffee and sit on the porch overlooking the sea. There was a rickety chair that groaned every time I leaned back in it, but I grew fond of the sound. Seagulls circled. The tide rolled in and out, like the slow breath of something ancient. I watched it and felt the noise in my head begin to quiet. I started walking barefoot again. On the sand, in the grass, through the worn path behind the dunes. I hadn't walked like that in years. Architecture makes you think in angles and structures, but this reminded me of the value of softness. Of things that bend without breaking. I wrote, too. Not about her. Not at first. I wrote about space. About betrayal. About what it feels like to sleep beside someone you no longer trust and still reach for them at 3 a.m. out of habit. I didn't post any of it. Not yet. But the words started coming easier, the shame less heavy. And then one night, on a whim, I opened TikTok and posted a clip of me talking about what it means to rebuild, not a house, but yourself. It got 12 views. Then 200. Then 4,000. People started commenting. Strangers, mostly. Men. Women. People in the middle of endings and beginnings. One woman said, "Your calm made me cry. I didn't know I needed that." Another wrote, "I left last month. Watching this reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't trying to be a guru. God knows the world doesn't need another one of those. But I told the truth. And somehow, that was enough." Over the next few weeks, I kept posting. Short thoughts. Little stories. Lessons I didn't know I'd learned. One morning I woke up to 500,000 followers. People started calling me the architect of healing. I laughed at that. But deep down, it felt like something was finally shifting, not just online, but in me. Back at home, Elizabeth's romance didn't last. Word got around that the yoga instructor had been liberal with his teachings. Several students. Same wine, same villa, same touch. A spiritual journey with no destination. She left him quietly. I heard about it through a mutual friend who texted, "Guess who's back in the city?" But she didn't reach out. And neither did I. We'd said what needed to be said. The kids stayed with me that summer. We built sandcastles. Ate popcorn for dinner. My daughter asked if I was sad. I told her the truth, I was. But sadness doesn't mean I'm broken. It means I cared. She nodded like she understood. And maybe she did. One afternoon, while walking the shore, my son asked if I thought Mom still loved me. I paused, looked at the waves rolling in, and said, she loved the part of me she could understand. And I loved the part of her that stayed. He didn't ask anything else. Some nights I still dream of her. Not of betrayal. Just moments. Her laughing in the passenger seat. Her hands in my hair. The smell of her on my pillow. I don't hate her. But I don't need her either. I keep the photo I took that night in a drawer. Not as punishment. Just as proof. That I wasn't crazy. That the collapse was real. That survival is not always loud. Sometimes it's just getting out of bed. Sometimes it's finding a rickety chair by the sea and learning to sit still long enough for the pain to stop buzzing. The truth is, you don't come out of betrayal the same man you were when you walked in. You leave parts of yourself behind, small ones, at first. The casual way you say, "I trust you." The quiet glance across a dinner table, unspoken affection held in your eyes. The kind of smile that doesn't need words. These things don't survive the fire. But what does survive? That's the part no one tells you about. You rebuild. Not fast. Not clean. But piece by piece, in silence, with shaking hands. And then one day, you catch your reflection in the mirror and realize something: you're not trying to go back to who you were before. You're not trying to rewind the clock or glue together old dreams. You're becoming something else. Something truer. I never thought I'd be the man who got cheated on. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting alone on a beach with a bottle of wine, talking into a phone camera about heartbreak and forgiveness. But here I am. And somehow, I'm more myself than I've ever been. I learned that love, real love, isn't just what you give to someone else. It's what you give back to yourself when they stop deserving it. I stopped asking why Elizabeth did what she did. There are 1,000 answers, and none of them would have changed the outcome. Was she lost? Lonely? Starved for attention? Maybe. Was I distant? Focused on work? Taking her for granted? Maybe. But that's the trap, trying to locate blame when what you need to find is yourself. That's what I did. And in doing so, I found the quiet power of choosing peace over proof. I didn't need her to confess. I didn't need her to fall apart in front of me. I saw what I needed to see. And I let go. I left the house we built, the dinner table where we raised our kids, the bed where she whispered another man's name in her heart. And I built something else. My own rhythm. My own stillness. My own life. Now, months later, I stand here by the water, a man I barely recognize, in the best way. I have fewer people around me, but the ones who stayed, they see me. I laugh easier. I cry harder. I feel everything now. And I don't apologize for it. And yes, I still think of her. But not with rage. Not with longing. Just with a kind of gratitude. Because losing her forced me to meet the man I'd been avoiding for years. The one underneath the title, the suit, the dinner reservations, the perfect husband routine. The man who had things to say. Who could hurt and still keep moving. Who could be alone and not be empty. Tonight, I set up my camera for one last video. I pour a glass of wine. The ocean is behind me, stretching out like an invitation. I smile into the lens, not the smile I wore in our wedding photos, but something deeper. Wiser. And I say, sometimes you have to lose someone to find yourself. Then I raise the glass. To endings. To beginnings. To the quiet strength it takes to walk away without looking back. And I turn off the camera. But not the light inside me. Not anymore. Sean.